bring in Tim Legler, who covers the NBA for the mothership. Not an easy segue here, Legs, but I do appreciate you. Were you in the NBA when Mahmoud was doing his silent protest?
When he was actually still Chris Jackson in Denver,
Yeah.
when he was a rookie. And then I remember that playing out. I believe I still was in the league. And I think some of the context around that was like the Gulf War, and it took on a different meaning in a context. That was Americans at war with a foreign country. And I think that's why what he did, I think, got even more severe backlash at that time. But it's no doubt that it definitely cost him. And when you take a stance like that meaningful to you, when it involves anything to do with the country and a national viewpoint, you run the risk of, how are people going to interpret this? And I think that's what this, Colin Kaepernick situation has been from the beginning. It's different people's interpretation of what that means.
What was your reaction to Drew Brees and then the fallout?
Yeah, well, I think as far as Drew Brees is concerned, I think he was expressing his own point of view. But I think what we have learned over time, all of us have learned, is the way that you may interpret a particular act might not be what the original intent was. And there are times you have to listen to the other side on what the intent of that action is and really take that to heart and make that meaningful. Now, you might still disagree with it, but when you come out and make a public statement in any way that's a negative reflection of it, and basically in doing so, you are saying, I really don't understand the interpretation that you've given me on what that means. You're going to get a significant reaction. And that's exactly what happened in the case of Drew Brees. Do I think he needs to be taken to the point where you now call Drew Brees a racist or things like that? I think that just takes it too far when you look at the way he's lived his life and what, all by all accounts, the things he's done in that community and just the kind of person that he generally is regarded as. I don't know that we need to make that leap. But I do think you need to understand there are going to be repercussions if you are going to voice an opinion that differs from what the intent of a particular action is.
Yeah, it's either black and white from the standpoint of your answers. I either agree with you or I don't. I'm either happy for what you said or I'm angry at what you said. I think Drew Brees is a wonderful person. By all accounts, what he's done after Katrina, the money that he donates, the importance of, his presence in that city. I just don't agree with his stance on the anthem. That's it. If he was on the show, I'd still embrace him for who he is and what he is, but we would agree to disagree. And I mean, that's the beauty. We have that luxury here, agreeing to disagree. I just don't believe that somebody is the best person in the world or the worst person in the world by what they say, what their opinion is. This is a complex issue there, and it certainly is with Drew Brees. I did want to talk some basketball with you, and the reason why we were going to have you on is we thought this was just going to be a normal Thursday where we're talking about 22 teams coming back into Orlando here. I'm confused about the format here, Legs. Why does it have to be so complicated?
Well, I think when you first get it and you start to read it, and even for a guy like myself, and I'm waiting to see what the format's going to be, they seem to finally come to a consensus. And when you first look at it, I agree. I had to read it several times to make sure I understood what was happening. But I think it's less complicated than maybe most people think it is. What it comes down to is this. They made a determination. First of all, they didn't want all 30 teams down there. I think it's a great decision. I didn't want to see teams down there playing meaningful, 5 to 8 games, whatever the number was going to be, and then shutting it down again for several months. I didn't think that made any sense whatsoever. I personally preferred just the 16 teams that were already in. There was enough of a gap between 8 and 9 in my mind that there was separation there. Let's just go and get this thing started and try to get it ended in a timely manner. What they came up with, I think, is a pretty good compromise. You keep more teams interested. There's 6 additional teams now that have an opportunity to close the gap on the 8 seed. And if you can get it within 4 games and you're in that position to be 9, you now have an opportunity to determine your own fate and play the 8 seed. And they have an advantage. And that the 8 only has to beat you once. You've got to beat them twice. But at least you can control your own destiny. So I think it keeps more teams interested, more players involved, and more fans are going to be interested at a time when we desperately need interest in live sports.
We're talking to Tim Legler, ESPN NBA analyst. By the way, Legs played his first NBA season 1989-90. You played in 310 career NBA games, making just 4 starts Is that right?
Probably, yeah. I mean, that's you get into that mode where you find a particular role. So there were times when clearly there were times I was playing on teams I was even playing maybe more significant minutes or more important minutes than the starter was, and then he would get hurt, but coaches would come to me and say, "Listen, we love what you're bringing off the bench in your particular role. We don't want to mess with that." So they would maybe even bring a guy that wasn't even playing in the rotation and then make him the starter. I ran into that a couple of times. So it was the only time in my life I wasn't able to start, but I was perfectly comfortable with it.
I don't know if you saw CBS Sports came out with their top 15 shooters of all time.
I did.
Did you see it?
I
Okay.
did.
Now, I thought there was a recency bias there, but I'm okay with it. Like, I'm not going to have my head explode like I did when ESPN said Michael Jordan's the greatest college player of all time.
Right.
Okay. Now, when it comes to shooting, Kyle Korver's in there. Steve Kerr are in there. This was my philosophy. I just thought to be a great shooter, you have to be able to create your shot to shoot. Because if you can't get your shot off, I don't care how good a shooter you are. Am I incorrect in my approach to the greatest shooters of all time?
No, I think that's a component in it, but I don't think you can just discount the guys that primarily were spot up 3-point shooters, because to do that at the level that the guys on that list do and the percentages they shoot, how good you have to be at that, how difficult it is to get to that level. And I think those guys have to be included as well. I mean, for me, when I think they tell me a great shooter, I don't just necessarily think about the guys that can go get their own offense. I think about those guys that when it comes off their fingertip and they've got any sort of space, you've got a really high percentage of likelihood that ball is going to end up in the bottom of the net. And I have a lot of regard for those guys. I was one of those guys. So I don't think you could just discount them. I agree with you, though, in terms of the list. I was scratching my head at how low they had Chris Mullin. That didn't make a lot of sense to me. You got Mullin in there at 14th. I played with that guy in Golden State. I know firsthand he's certainly better than the 14th best shooter that's ever lived. And he was a guy that could get his own shot as well, by the way.
Well, who would you put there? Who's your top five?
Well, I think you'd probably go Steph, Clay, right there at the top. I think Larry Bird's got to be in the top five, which he was. I don't remember where exactly they had him in the list, but I think he was in the top five. I think that's absolutely justified. I think Kevin Durant is a guy that you probably would have to consider because, again, it's the catch and shoot, but it's also his ability to shoot those kind of percentages from all over the floor and his ability to get to any area of the floor with a perfect shooting stroke. I don't have a problem with including Kevin Durant. And then I would look at a guy like Steve Nash.
Yep.
I think Steve Nash has to be up there because you're talking again about a guy that shoots every year practically 50 from the field, 40 to 50 from the three, 90 plus from the line, and his finishing ability. Like, that's one thing that gets discounted sometimes. And that's why Curry, for me, no question, number one, because in addition to his long range stuff, his ability to finish with floaters and runners and an array of shots with either hand, that's got to also add heavily into this. And Steve Nash was also in that category.
Yeah, I put him in there, I think, in my top three because of what you just said. I can shoot deep. I can have a mid-range jumper. I'm great from the line, and I can finish at the hoop. And there are very few guys in NBA history who can do all of those and shoot at a high percentage. I did want to ask you about the Zion factor with the playoffs. If you had cut and dried 8-8, let's say New Orleans was the 8th seed in the West, Legs, would we be having 22 teams in Orlando?
That's a great question. I know there's a lot of speculation, so I'll just give my opinion. I'll say probably not. I think that plays heavily into it. And look, if you're the league, you can't blame them. I mean, this has been devastating financially for the league, what they've gone through. So certainly when you have a guy like that was that entertaining, and I think at the time this thing shut down, he was as close to must-see TV as anybody in the league. So to include him for a minimum of 8 games and potentially more than that, I think that's a business decision for the league. And fortunately for them, the Pelicans were within striking distance that you make a really solid argument that they should be included in this. And also when you look at strength of schedule the rest of the year with Memphis and New Orleans, I think Memphis was going to have a really difficult time with their schedule to hold these teams off and hold on to that last spot.
By the way, Legs once challenged me to a 3-point shooting contest, and he was going to shoot left-handed. Do you remember when you?
I absolutely do. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that offer still stands.
Man, I was so mad at you. I was like, there's no way you're going to beat me left-handed from 3-point range. But
Well, listen, Dan, I'll tell you, on my 50th birthday, which was 3 years ago, all I wanted to do that day, I told my wife and my kids, and both of whom play, we're going to go to the local rec center and I'm going to make 53s on my 50th birthday. Let's see how long it takes me. And what do you think I shot that day? To make 50, what do you think I shot overall?
I'm going to say less than 60.
I was 50 for 56. Now I did warm up. Here's what's funny about that story. I warmed up a little bit. I did it once. I actually shot better than that. Forgot to record it. So now here I am, pretty winded at that point, and I'm saying, "Oh my God, we got to do it again." And I really didn't think I would shoot that well, so I was pretty proud of myself. Now they were college threes. I will say that they weren't NBA threes. I don't shoot that deep anymore that often, but they were college threes. But I was still pretty proud of the accomplishment.
Do you think you could actually beat me shooting left-handed?
Pretty certain of it. Wow. I get a nasty left. Like when I'm just we're talking here just shooting jumpers uncontested.
Yeah.
Pretty good left, man. I got a pretty nasty left.
All right. I'll invite you to my dojo here in the man cave. I'll just shoot right-handed. You shoot left-handed.
Get me in there. Get me in there. I can't wait. Looking forward to the challenge.
Doug Gottlieb never recovered from me roasting him shooting threes.
The best chance you would have, I would say, to get me somewhere like outdoors where there are conditions that factor in. But if you got me in a climate-controlled environment, Dan, it's a problem.
We also remember Greg Anthony tried to get involved in the conversation, and I said, Anthony, get out of here, man. You can't shoot like I can shoot. And you even said, yeah, Greg, get out of here. We basically
you shut that down pretty quickly.
Yeah, you can shoot 15-footers there, Greg, but that's it. These are big boy shots.
Greg's conversation is more like, listen, if we're going to do the competition, we're picking people up 94 feet and turning them 8 times before half court. You got it, man. But if it comes down to just shooting jumpers, let's that's not necessarily your wheelhouse.
Oh, that was great. Hey, Legs, thanks for joining us. Hope you're well, and we appreciate you joining us.
Great talking to you, Dan. Take care.
That's Tim Legler.